So hello everyone, this is the long version of the video that covers the wiring harness build. As always, be careful when working on this. Again, I'm not responsible for anything that may happen to your hardware or to yourself. Be very careful, I'm just an amateur mechanic and an amateur electrician. This will cover the colors of the ECU pinout. I will present you colored version of the ECU pinout diagram for the 40GE Blacktop. I will compare the 40FE and 40GE fuse boxes, and I will show you how I reverse engineered the 40GE fuse box to determine the role of each of the pins in the two plugs that we'll have to map that I have called plugs A and B. You will see. Part 4 will cover the 4AFE wiring diagram. I found this on the internet. I have annotated the relevant parts of the wiring diagram for you to see. And part 5 will cover the junction boxes, the thick wires and the rerouting that goes through the fuse box, as well as all the fuses for the ABS, main fuse, alternator, and the main difference, which is the main fuse is inside the fuse box in the case of the 4AFE, so we need additional rerouting. Finally, I will show you my reasoning for solving some difficult cases. Okay, let's take a look at the 4AGE Blacktop wiring harness. So, here you can see a diagram of the 4AGE Blacktop ECU pinout, and you can see this was taken from the internet, the common diagram for this ECU, and you can see for each of the connectors of the plugs their respective colors. I have taken this from my own wiring harness to make it easy for you guys to navigate around the wiring harness when you are doing the conversion. Some notes, you can see that my notation for a white wire is this one over here. It is a cross circle, and you can see we have 3 white wires. We have one here, and one here. These sections, this line of colors, this line and this line, correspond to the top halves of each of the plugs. This is for the white wire. There is an aqua wire, which is a slightly between a light blue and a light green. It's this color over here, and an example of aqua is this one over here, in which I have made a series of short lines alternated between blue and green to illustrate the aqua color. Pink is this one. We have a pink over here, just so that you can have a notion. Red are, for example, this color over here. This is a red and white and yellow stripe wire. When you have an outer contour and then an inner color, that means that the outer contour is the bigger color of the wire, and the inner part is the color of the stripe. So this wire over here would be the fifth wire counting from the right. You can see battery, I believe, this one, then 3 blanks, and then we have the W. W would be the warning light, and the warning light is this one over here, which will be a red wire with a yellow stripe. No wire notation is denoted by this over here. This just use the blue pen, blue ballpoint pen, and there no wire, for example, are these 3. These will indicate that there is no wire. There's a difference between this one and the black wire. Black wire is, for example, this one, or this one over here, this one. And black with white stripe is this one, just to illustrate my notation for the stripes on the wires. You can find this diagram in the description among the documents I will list in the wiring harness videos. So the first step is to remove all the plugs from the 4AFE fuse box so that we can analyze it separately from the wiring harness. Be very careful when using a pair of pliers for this, because you may accidentally break one of the wires. So let's take a look at the fuse boxes. This is the fuse box on the Corolla E11. This came out of my car. And this came with the wiring harness for the 4AG. You see, when they stripped the car, they cut this part of the wiring harness and left the part that I believe pertains to the engine. So the goal is to separate this. I won't be using this fuse box. I have to use this one because the majority of the systems are in this circuit, and we will have to adapt the wires from this fuse box to this one. There are many similarities between the two fuse boxes. Many relays are similar in the ratings. So if we can just switch places of some switches, we may be able to solve part of the problem. Let's get on with this. We start by removing all the plugs from the 4AG fuse box. Removing those cut up wires from the fuse box, at least what remains of the non-engine part of the circuitry that goes to it, we are left with two plugs, one called A and one called B. These plugs are related to the engine of they are related to the wiring harness for the 4AG engine, and our goal is to split those plugs and determine which wire goes into which place on the 4AFE fuse box, because we want to use it. To do this, we will need to figure out which of the pins does what job in the Levin fuse box. Since I do not have access to the wiring, the inner circuit of the Levin fuse box, we will have to do this through reverse engineering. So, I have taken apart the fuse box and the relay box because I could not find the schematic for the interior, the circuit of the fuse and relay box. Here are all the relays. The fuses, I took them out. And now we have to figure out the circuit for those two connectors that I showed previously. So the first step I did was to draw a map of the layout of the fuse box. You see, I have two pins, another and another two. See, and I have built this layout so that I can look and know which pins correspond to the pins in the fuse box. And now to test, we want to determine for the pins on the couple of harness connectors that we are trying to diagnose, which is a connector that connects to 6 pins over here, and then another connector that connects to these pins over here. We have to go over each of these pins and determine which are connected to this side. What I do is I give a name to each of the harness connector pins. I have called this one A, this one here with 6 pins, and I have written the corresponding colors on each slot of the wire. For example, I have written a B here that corresponds to black. It's a black wire that goes here. So, to determine the connections between this side here, between this pin, which is the A1 pin, the first pin, I connect it to the corresponding pin on the fuse box, and then I go over all of the pins on the other side to determine which ones have contact. We have one here. So this one here, which is the Delta 3 pin, has a connection with the A1 pin on this side here. So I take a note of the connection. Now let's move on to the next pin. Let's see. We are now testing the A2 pin. Let's go over all the connectors. We have one here. Now I make a note of which component does what according to the cover of the fuse box on the 4AGE. Here is the final diagram done after doing all this beeping and figuring out which plug goes into which place, into which function, or into which component of the fuse and relay box. I'll try to explain how to read this diagram. So for each of the pins on the A plug that you can see over here, for example the A1 pin, which is green with the black stripe. Toyota diagrams differentiate between black and blue, since they both start with a B. They make a distinction. When you see an L, it means the blue color. When you see a B, it means black color. I have determined from the reverse engineering process that it connects to the Delta 3 pin, which is, we follow this line, and it will connect to this pin over here, which corresponds, according to the diagram of the relay, because relays have different pins with different functions, they have their own numbering. These are the numbers on the relay face, and these match the layout of the pins that in which the relay sits. For example, there will be a pin over here in this region underneath the relay. There will be a pin in the middle, and then another one over here, and then another one on the edge. So to complement this, we now know that this connects to pin 1 on the relay notation on that diagram. I have illustrated this. I have made my own changes to this. This just to highlight that pins 4 and 2, for example, are the power circuit, so they have this symbol over here. This is a switch. And pins 3 and 2 are the activation switch, the control circuit. This has this sort of like spring-like diagram. This denotes a coil, a control circuit. So I generalize this to all the other components. You can see, according to the diagram on the fuse box cover, I have determined which of these relays activates what. For example, this one is the engine main relay, this one is the EFI, this is the starter relay, this is the headlight relay, and then we have lots of fuses. These here are fuses. This one is a fan idle up fuse. This one is for the horn. This one is a spare, doesn't matter. This one is for the dome, whatever. You see, this the point is to know which pin on which of the two plugs that we have seen, plugs A and B, each pin goes and activates each of these wires. And now we can see the diagram I made for the 4AFE fuse box. I have made a color color representation of each of the pins that we have seen from the A and B plugs. This is the same as the one shown for the 4EGE reverse engineering diagram that I have shown previously. And this is really helpful for you to figure out which pins connect to which areas. This is done by tracing back the same functions as the ones in the 4EGE. For example, I noticed which wires went into, for example, to determine which wire would connect to the B3 pin. I would trace back according to the same rule. Like in the 4EGE, if it connected to the one pin on the EFI relay, I signaled this in color, and then I traced back to each of the pins to make a marking of each circuit. For the same is true for the B6 pin, for example. If I knew that it went to the Alt-S fuse, I would just signal everything in color, as you can see. An important aspect as well is these plugs over here. You see, an important aspect for this is to ignore all the wires that come from the engine room main wire. When you see engine room main wire, this is a wire that will stay in the car when you remove this fuse box. It's not related to the engine. You only have to pay attention to these, the ones that say from engine wire, not from engine room main wire. These ones will be left in the car. You see that there are actually only a couple. There is this one, the 2B, it's a big plug, engine wire. The black one, which is 2D, this is the name of the plug. As well, 2C, another engine wire. And another important note is that the 4AFE fuse box does not have a fuse for the idle up system. This, I believe, it's a system that when the fan goes off due to the temperature of the engine, this will increase the idle on the engine to compensate for the increased load on the alternator. If we do not have this working, the engine will likely stall or go really low on the RPM with danger of stalling, maybe on hot days. I have have added a fuse inside the fuse box to account for this. You can see it is missing. I have all these signals here. And that connects to the B1 pin. That's how I figured it out. You can also see the corresponding locations in the top of the fuse box. Once again, we have the pin numbers of the relays on these diagrams. For each of the relays, these numbers denote the pin numbers on each of the relay. And then we have you see this signaled here. This is for the fan number 1 relay, pin 2, and then we go over here to the diagram. And in the diagram, pin 2 will connect to the 2C1 wire, which is the wire number 1, wired in position 1 of the 2C connector. Will also connect to the 2F2 wire. So we have to look 2C. Which one is 2C? It's an engine wire connector. We are looking at 2C1. 2C1 will be this pin over here. And then 2F2 will be this pin over here. In this case, if you would have to choose between connecting the wire to each of the two plugs to which it is connected, you would choose the 2C connector because that's the one that goes to the engine. The engine main wire has to be left alone. This rule is applied in a lot of pins and a lot of connections. This is only an example to show you how to navigate around the diagram. That's how I did my studies. You can follow this to trace back if this installation is correctly done or to improvise your own. So here is the explanation for the for connecting the 4AFE EFI relay, at least the positions that the 4AFE EFI relay has on the original Fusebox, to the wiring harness of the 4AGE. This is really a tricky one because of two things. First one is the 4AGE uses a different relay, different EFI relay than the 4AFE. The 4AGE requires a 30 ampere relay, but the shape of the two relays is different. The 4AFE has this shape over here, and the 4AGE will have a bigger shape. It's bigger and it will not fit on the 4AFE Fusebox. So we have to find one with the same shape as the 4AFE1, but with the ampere rating of the 4AGE. I'm still looking for this, and hopefully I will get back to you when I figure out the part number for that. Regarding the circuits themselves, we have a mapping for each of the pins on the relay. This is pin 1, pin 2, pin 5 and pin 3 according to a schematic I found on the internet for this part number. You can look it up if you want to. The coil pins are the 1 and 2, then the power pins are 3 and 5. In this case, I have established this mapping over here. For each of the pins, it corresponds to the B3 pin on the Levin Fusebox, except for this one over here. This one, in the 4AFE, the Fusebox, the wiring harness has a wire that goes into the relay and back from the relay. The 4AGE, as far as I could understand, does not have that. It only has one wire that goes to the relay, and then I believe it relies on the engine compartment wires to establish the connection. I'm hoping this will be like a ground connection, because the current can come into this pin, for example, and then if this is the ground, it will simply make the connection, and we will have EFI power. So that's why this is not signaled as a wire, because the wire is simply not there in the 4AGE wiring harness. So this is unknown. The others are really easy. The others are the mappings I have established. There are the A3 pin on the Levin plugs will connect to the 2C10 pin on the 4AFE, and the same for the others. As you can see, my criteria for separating this is like this. This one here, it says ER. I don't know if you can see, but it says ER. It means engine room. So if I have to choose between an engine room wire and a wire that goes into one of the plugs that is for the engine wiring harness, I choose to connect to the engine wiring harness, because that's what we are remapping here. The circuit will have the same nature in the engine room. At least that's my thinking and my reasoning for this. Correct me in the comments if you think I am wrong.
Okay, so now we have to take care of the junction boxes for the main fuses of the fuse box. And the first thing you notice when you look at both fuse boxes, both junction boxes, is that the 4AGE has 3 fuses and the 4AFE has only 2. The difference is the main fuse that in the Levin is a part of this junction box, and in the case of the 4AFE it is inside the fuse box. So another challenge here, we have to figure out how to route the wires that go to the main fuse through the fuse box instead of through that junction box.
In this diagram we have the two junction boxes side by side. On the left you can see the 4AGE junction box, and on the right is the 4AFE configuration of its own junction box. And we have to establish some mappings here. It is easy to see that the 4AGE has an extra pair of pins that correspond to the main fuse. In the absence of the main fuse, we have to
short something or to make a direct connection in this junction box here. It seems clear. So we have to understand a little bit the role of the main fuse. The main fuse is what feeds many of the car's smaller appliances. When I'm saying small appliances, I'm saying like the headlights, the stoplights. There are medium power currents, not small current like electronics. You can see these dashes here. These signal short plates. It means that here there are the bolts that connect the wire, and then between the bolts there are those shorting plates that make electricity flow unrestrained from one wire to the other. Like for example, this wire here is for the battery. It's a black wire that comes from the battery, a thick black wire. And when the electricity comes from the battery, this shorting plate will mean that there will be a direct flow of electricity to this medium black wire directly without going through any fuse. That's the first thing. The other thing is that we have to understand the role of the alternator and the battery. There is a circuit in both situations. There is a separation of the accumulation circuit, that is the battery, and the charging circuit, which is the alternator. Alternator wires are usually white wires. They are both in both situations. They are the wire that comes from the alternator is a white wire. And let's analyze the situation. The car is stopped. Okay, the engine is not running. And we have to analyze what is the flow of current in this situation. In this situation, we have to power things in the car. Even though the engine is stopped, electricity will have to flow from the accumulation circuit, that is the battery, to all the electrical appliances that turn on when you turn on the key, as well as the ignition, so that we can fire up the engine. How does this work? You see, over here there is this black wire that comes from the battery in the 4AGE. In the 4AFE, it's the same. A thick black wire comes from the battery. They both connect to a pin in the alternator fuse. A fuse, for those of you that don't know how a fuse works, a fuse is simply a piece of wire that connects two pins. Between these pins there is a small wire that is specifically calibrated. The thickness of it is specifically calibrated so that it will fuse or burn out when a current that is higher than 100 ampere will go through goes through the fuse. The end result is that when you have current flowing from pin 1 to pin 3, for example, through that fuse, if there is a short circuit somewhere, the current will be much higher than 100 ampere. That's why stuff burns. When people take a fuse and put in a piece of, for example, foil or tobacco wrap, what happens is that there is not this protection. There is not that wire specifically designed to burn out in face of that high current. But in this case we have a working fuse. So what happens is this: the electricity comes from the battery, goes through the fuse, and then through this short over here, and then will go to the connectors on the fuse box through the couple of white wires. Another part of the circuit is the ABS. The ABS has its own protection. It has its own fuse of 50 ampere. So, tracing back, electricity comes from here, goes through the pin on the alternator fuse, through the special wire that burns at 100 ampere, then through this shorting plate to the pin 2 on the ABS fuse. It goes through another special wire to power the ABS circuit that is rated at 50 ampere. Since it's a smaller circuit than the alternator, it will have a lower rating of electrical current. At the same time, a couple of wires will run through the fuse box, and those two wires are the special wires that we have to take into account. Look, here there is the main fuse, right? On the 4AGE there is the main fuse. On the 4AFE there is no main fuse. However, the main fuse, in spite of not being here, even though it's not here, it's inside the fuse box. So what will happen is that one of these wires will have to go through the main fuse that is inside the fuse box and then back. So you see what I mean? The job that is performed by the wire, in this case the wire that comes from the alternator, it's this wire that goes into this pin on the 4AFE, is the same wire that on the 4AGE connects over here. We have a similar circuit. The electricity goes from the alternator to the charging part of the circuit. This is the battery, and this is the battery here. An alternator wire comes from here, goes through the fuse, and then to the battery. Alternator wire goes through the fuse, the same in the 4AGE, and then goes to the battery through the shorting plate. It's exactly the same, but in this case there is a shorting plate. But imagine that there is no shorting plate. The wire from the battery, if it was connected over here, and imagine there was no main fuse, the circuit will be exactly the same. Electricity coming from the alternator, going through the alternator fuse, and then into the battery. It's the same here. Electricity coming from the alternator through the alternator fuse and going into the battery. We have to, for each of these pins, ensure that all the circuits are exactly the same. The only difference is really the presence of the main fuse in this junction box on the 4AGE, and on the 4AFE the fuse box, the fuse box holds the main fuse. It's inside the actual fuse box. So we have to perform an additional mapping to determine which wire goes into the main fuse inside the fuse box and which wire takes electricity out of the main fuse. So that covers the main fuse and as well as the circuit, the charging circuit between the battery. So when the car is about to be started, it's not started yet, electricity comes from the battery through the main fuse and powering all small appliances. It also powers, when the engine is not working, it will also go from here through the shorting plate to the fuse, the alternator fuse, and then through another shorting plate to power the ABS. In this case, when the car is not working, battery will go through, the electricity will flow through all these connectors to power the ABS even though the car is not working. So you will have ABS, you will have a working ABS even though the car is not working. In this case, at least electricity will run to the system. I don't know if it actually works, depends on electronics, but at least power will go to the ABS, just to correct for, to be 100% correct. In the 4AFE, it's similar. When the car is not working, electricity will come from the battery, through the alternator fuse, through a shorting plate, and then to the ABS. You see, similarities between the circuits. When the car is working, electricity will flow from the alternator, through the alternator fuse, and into the battery, as well as all the main appliances. Notice, electricity will come through here, through the fuse, then through the shorting plate, to charge the battery. At the same time, electricity will flow through the main fuse and to power all the small appliances. We will have a situation where the battery is not doing anything, it's just being charged, and the alternator will directly power all the accessories in the car, as well as the spark plugs, as well as everything that is electrical in the car. Let's look at the 4AFE to see the same situation working. Electricity will flow from the alternator through the shorting plate. You see the shorting plate. Electricity will go from here, then will go through the shorting plate, and then go through these couple of wires that will go to the main fuse, which will then protect all the circuits that run to all the appliances in the car. So you see, it's exactly the same. The only difference is the main fuse inside the fuse box in the case of the 4AFE. It's important for you to understand these meanings, and I know that this comes from the alternator and this comes from the battery, because I use my multimeter to see which contacts, like I would plug one terminal of my multimeter into the positive cable that goes into the battery,
and the other terminal into this wire over here, the end of this wire. If it beeped, I know that there is a circuit there. Do the same, take your time, and you will see with the wires on your side that this explanation will make sense to you. I hope this is not too much confusion. Now we have to go over each one of these. Remove the corresponding one on this one, on this fuse group over here. After making these mappings, you will come to the conclusion that most of the times you are just joining wires with the same color. If that's the case, you are going well with the mapping, and well, I think that the roles are the same. But there are some exceptions. Some wires that, for example, you have two wires with the same color, you don't know which ones go into where. And they are indeed different. I will show you how to do this, as well as figuring out an idle up issue. One of the wires is idle up, and the wire does not exist in the 4FE fuse box. So here is my reasoning for figuring out these difficult cases, so that you can apply these notions even to other wiring harnesses. Now I'm taking care of the B4 pin, which is red and white wire. This connects to the 5 pin on the EFI relay. According to the fuse box, the A4 will connect to the 5-pin relay on the EFI. So what we do is we check out which pin on the original, on the fuse box of the 4FE will connect to the same 5 pin. And we know it's there are 2 pins on 2 plugs that come from the 5 pin. One on the 2E8 plug and one on the 2B3 plug. The 2B3 plug is a big, thick black wire, if I'm not mistaken. No, it's a thick white wire. This one is the 2B plug. It's the middle one, white. So only one remains, which is the 2E plug. The 2E plug is exactly the gray plug of the engine. So we have to place this on the 2E8 position, solder this into this one, and then this will go into the fuse box, and the wire will be the same. It will connect to the 5 pin on the EFI, just the same. Now we have to take care of the B plug, which is this gray plug here on the 4AG wiring harness. First pin is the B1, which I called B1 according to my diagram. You can see B1, which is white and blue. This one here. This is the orientation that the plug is in the diagram. So we have white and blue and white and blue. This is the B1 pin, and this is an idle up fuse, connects to the idle up fuse, and there is no idle up fuse on the 4AFE fuse box. So we'll skip this for now, because we'll probably have to make a separate fuse just for this fan idle up. Now we move on for the B2 pin, which will connect the one pin on the starter relay. So we go over to our diagram of the 4AFE, and we see the pin number 1 on the starter relay. It's this one over here. Where does this connect to? This connects to the 2D3 plug, which is a plug from the engine wire. This will be a thick wire, and also connects to the 2E11 wire. The 2E11 is a plug from the engine, from an engine plug on the 4AFE. This plug is from the 4AFE. So since the circuit is made by the fuse box, we leave this one alone, the 2D plug, which is already reconstructed. So in the original installation of the 4AFE, I noticed that the wiring of the color of the B3 pin is exactly black and white, with a white black and a white strip. So we are doing something right here, I think. But there are two wires with the same color, so we have to figure out which one goes to the same place. These wires in the 4AFE, one goes to the ECU and another one goes to the cluster. So I will determine which one goes to the cluster on the original 4AFE installation and which one goes to the cluster in the 4AGE, and I will place them in the same spots, so that the wire with the black and white color that goes to the ignition, to the cluster, will be connected to the same place, and the wire that goes to the ECU connectors, you see, among these wires there is one with the same color as this. This wire has to go also to the ECU. So even though you have wires with the same colors, one has to go to the same place. If it goes to the cluster, these plugs here, this is for the cluster. There is also a white and black, as you can see. We have to determine which one of these goes to the cluster and which one goes to the ECU, and connect the original installation of the fuse box, determine which one went to the cluster or to the ECU on the original fuse box, so that we can match them. So let's look at wires of the same color and see which ones beep. So we have one here. This one goes to the cluster on one end, and on the other end it does not beep. So it has to beep on the other one. Let's see, just for good measure. This does not connect to any wire of the same color in the cluster. There are no wires on this plug. There are no wires black with a white stripe, so I'm not checking that. Let's just check all connectors to see if this wire goes into the cluster. Nope. So this has to connect to the ECU. This one, this small one, has to connect to the ECU. Let's look for the plug of the ECU. Let's look for the wire with the same color. Nope, no one in this plug. No black with white stripe. Once again, no black with white stripe, and you look at the last plug, and there are two blacks with white stripe. We have one here, and this one is the same color, but it's not connected, so I suspect this is an internal circuit of the ECU. So now we do the same for the wiring of the 4AGE. There are two wires with the same color, so we have to determine which one goes to the cluster and which one goes into the ECU. So the ECU has two black and white connectors, just like in the 4AFE. So we put one terminal in the first black and the black wire with a white stripe. Make sure it's held in place. And then we go over to the ECU connectors. We look for the wires with the same color. So we have to write our conclusions. The B2 let's see. B2 goes to the ECU. Let's see if it goes into the cluster as well. No wires with color here. Let's see if this goes into the cluster. No, there is only one wire on the 4G harness. There is only one wire with the same color, black and white, and it is not connected to the this wire. This one we have just seen that it goes to the ECU is not connected to the cluster. Yes. So the other one has to be connected to the cluster and not connected to the ECU for our logic to make sense. So let's connect to the B5 pin. Place our probe there. And this should not go to the ECU but rather to the cluster for the logic to make sense. Be similar to the other wiring harness. Let's see if this is really the case. Okay, we have this goes into the cluster. Now let's see if it makes contact with the ECU pins. The other one made contact with this pin over here. Of these pins, these plugs, 3 plugs by order, makes contact with this pin over here, STA in the diagram. Now it should not make contact with the STA. It does not make contact with STA. but it should not also make contact with this if there is an isolation between the ECU wires and cluster wires. Let's see. I'm placing my needle just to make sure that I have good contact. Nope. As expected, this only goes to the cluster. So we make a note of B5 goes to the cluster. So we now have an equivalence of sorts. We can see that in the 4EFE, the wire with the large plug on the end, in the 4EFE is disconnected. So we have to plug the wire from the 4AG wiring harness that goes to the cluster, which is B5. We have to connect it to the corresponding plug on the 4EFE wiring harness for the wire that goes to the cluster, which is this one with the bigger plug, and that would be 2D3. So as a conclusion, we have to remove this, we have to cut this, remove this connector, and we have to plug it in. We have to solder this and plug it into the where is it? We have to plug it in to the place where 2B3 used to be, which is this one here, this pin. The same is true for the other wire. The other wire, which goes to the ECU, as we have determined, which is this one, will have to be plugged. So according to the schematics, that wire is the 2E11 wire, because it is this plug, which is asymmetrical, and as you can see, this wire was on the 2-pin side, because there are 2 pins on the asymmetric, one on each of the asymmetrical sides, and then there are 3 pins on the other asymmetrical side. So we look at this and we see that on the side of the 2 pins symmetrical side, which is this one over here, we have the 2E11 pin, which is the wire that goes to the ECU. So there it is. We have to put the wire that goes to the ECU on the 4AGE motor, which is the B2 wire, as we have taken note. The B2 wire, which is let's see, which is this one over here, the black and white one. This one will have to go into the 2E11 plug, like I was saying. C9 pin. So let's check out, according to the diagram, where is the 2C9 pin. 2C9 connects directly to the B4, which is blue with a yellow stripe. It's not connected to anything in the fuse box, so I'll go with the color coding for the ECU. And according to the ECU color coding, this wire is responsible for the IGF pin, which means it is responsible for the igniter. I have to look for the color coding of the 4EFE ECU to figure out if this function is the same. if this yellow wire if this blue wire with a yellow stripe is also responsible for the igniter in the 4EFE ECU. So, after looking at the wiring diagram for the 4EFE, we can confirm that the IGF pin is indeed responsible for the ignition, for the pulse generation for the idling, according to the manual, and the color is indeed blue and yellow. So the role is the same on both cars, and the conclusion is that we have to remove this wire, blue and yellow, which is the B4 wire, and put it in the place where there was a wire of the same color. So according to my old pictures, this was in the 4EFE installation, there was a wire with that color in this pin over here, which is the pin, let me see documentation, this wire is the 2C9. To cope with this idle up wire, I have made an adaptation. It's the ugliest part of this work, I think. But, well, I think it will last. I have bought these plugs. They come in sets of male, female, and the plastic ends. You see, this is used normally for connecting speakers and other stuff in cars and in other situations. Then I have put an extra terminal, you see, with the wires, the ones that go in to the fuse and the exit, the one of the sides of the fuse and the other. And then on the other side we have this connector that I have improvised from a couple of female pins from the other fuse box, and the connector, as you can see. And then there is a 5 amp fuse, which is the rated fuse for this idle up thing. So I will insulate this with electrical tape. Everything is secure, and I have a plug on the other side that I can connect to this plug over here. The other wire will go into the let's see, we saw this, will go into the pin 3 of the fan relay, which will be the 2G1 and 2G7 pins on the engine room wire. The wire is still in the car. I did not remove it, so I'll have to splice into that wire and insert a bit of that wire from one of those two pins into here. Then I will connect this to here, and we will have a clean fuse box for this installation. So, if you have survived this hour-long video with me babbling on about B5, B6, and plug A and plug B, I congratulate you. I think that you are indeed a strong soul, and I hope this video helped you out. Please, if you have anything to add, don't hesitate to drop me a comment to help other people that watch this video. And until next time, don't forget to give me that thumbs up, maybe subscribe to the channel, and share this on your local forum if you have people working on similar swaps.